Hello everyone, Dark here. We're gonna go with the second lesson in this video series regarding coding. In this episode, we will talk about for loops and functions. So if you haven't looked at the previous video, I would do that first before getting into this one because they kind of build upon each other. In the previous video, we talked about conditional statements and classes and variables. And in this video, we're going to talk about the remaining two fundamental pieces of programming, which is loops and functions. So we're going to explore these two concepts by looking at League of Legends and Final Fantasy this time. So if I opened up the practice tool in League of Legends, and as you can see, we have Morgana here. And what I want to do is, the typical meme we have in League, press D to dance. So when you actually type /dance in League, your character starts doing their specific dance. And if you keep watching, the character will just keep repeating the same dance moves over and over again. And this will just keep going if you let it, right? So as you can see here, Morgana is throwing out some of her best moves, and she will just keep doing this until one point where we say stop, right? And the way you stop dancing in League is if you just do any other action. So if I right click here, that would be the end of it, right? So as you can see, there's something. This is a loop, and this is it is exactly what it means. It means something just keeps repeating until you tell it to stop. So in this case, the character keeps doing the dance moves until you actually tell it to stop. And in this case, the stopping point is where you do, when you click on some piece of terrain or use one of your abilities. So if I press Q right now, she will stop doing whatever she was doing. Just to show you guys another example of a loop in League of Legends, is when you actually attack, when you auto attack a minion, a jungle, or anything, right? The animations that the champion does is the same thing, right? So 2 right, 1 left in case of Morgana, right? So if you look, 1 right, 1 left. And so the animation will keep repeating until it stops. And I'll keep that as kind of an exercise for you guys to write in the comment section what is it that you do until it stops, right? So one of them I just showed you. When you move, she stops auto attacking, and you break out of that loop of auto attacking repeatedly. But there are other conditions where the loop stops and you come out of it. So that's the basic concept of loops and how they work. It just means that you repeatedly do something until some condition happens and you just stop, right? You break out of it. So that's what loops are, and let's look at an example in Final Fantasy now. All right, before going into showing some examples of loops in Final Fantasy, I want to show you guys the same functionality that we had in League, where you could type /dance, and the way they had coded it was to keep dancing. So there was a loop. In Final Fantasy, it's the opposite. So when I actually write /dance, the character does the dance moves, but then it just stops. So it's only doing it once, right? So there's no loop here, as you can see. If you want to show an example of a loop in Final Fantasy, is I'm going to start auto attacking this ice sprite and take a look at the animations and see if you can see a pattern. So you see how it keeps alternating between left and right, left and right. And so the program is telling it, keep auto attacking, keep doing the auto attack until something happens, until we tell it to stop, or until the minion dies, right? So keep doing it until something specific happens, and then it stops, right? So that's it. So that's an example of a loop. It it's telling it to keep doing something until you actually stop. So I want to show that these concepts are universal. Loops, you're going to see them everywhere in any game, whether it's a MOBA like League of Legends, or if it's an MMORPG like Final Fantasy. If it's a shooter game like Overwatch or Modern Warfare, they're all the same. It's the same principles being applied everywhere, and once you know it, you're going to begin to see it everywhere as you go, right? So if you look, I'll give you another example. I'm standing still, right? So the animation of me standing still, of the fog coming out of my mouth here, and my cloak in the wind is it's just repeating over and over again. If you don't look at it with that eye, you would think that you wouldn't think much of it, but you can see that it's a loop where, you know, this fog keeps coming out of my mouth after every few milliseconds. So the next concept we want to talk about is the concept of functions. And again, we're gonna actually show examples so you can correlate them with gameplay. And we're gonna start off with League. As I was showing you before, we have Morgana here, and a function is basically a series of things that happen together when something happens in the game, right? So to show you an example, I have Morgana here, and her Q ability, Dark Binding, is a function. And what do I mean by that? So when I press Q, what is all the different things that needs to happen, right? So when I press Q, you see the animation goes off. My mana goes down by whatever what's the cost here? 50 mana, right? And what else happens? The jungle camp takes a certain amount of damage. So they take, what is it? 96 damage. And I don't want to die here. Let's do that. So the jungle camp takes 96 damage. What else happens? They also get rooted. So when you press Q, all those series of events happen together, and we call that a function, right? So all these different events that happen when you actually press one button is called a function, and that function, we can call it the Dark Binding function. So if you were to write some code for this, you're going to say, okay, whenever someone throws Q, I want my mana to get subtracted by 50, right? Because that's the amount of mana that this spell costs. What else do I want to happen? I want the Dark Binding animation to go off in the direction of my mouse, right? And then what else? If it hits the enemy, I want the HP of the enemy to go down by 96. Also, I want them to get rooted, so they shouldn't be able to move. And I want the Q spell to go on cooldown for 10 seconds, meaning they're not going to be able to press Q again. So you see, with one button press, you're saying all these different things need to happen, and that's what a function means. When you actually write a piece of code for something, some event, something that happens in the game or something that's not in the game, that has, you know, a bunch of stuff that needs to happen together. Okay. So again, I'll show you guys. So I press Q, you'll see the animation, you'll see the mana go down, you'll see the HP go down, and you see the spell going on cooldown. And all of this is happening by just pressing one button. So let's show another example of a function. Your auto attack is a function, right? So every time you auto attack, what's happening? The animation is going off. The blue blue buff is taking certain amount of damage, 56 damage, and yeah, that's it. And after each auto attack, you're waiting, you know, whatever milliseconds between each auto attack based on your attack speed, right? So all of those things are happening every time you do an auto attack, and that's a function. And if you recall, when we talked about loops, what we're really saying in the loop is keep doing the auto attack function until we tell it to stop, right? And that's what a function means in programming, right? When a series of events need to happen, which are all related to each other. So you can think of movement like you see how we're moving on the map. That's also a function. Why? Because when you're moving, a series of things are happening, right? We're telling the the program that we want Morgana to play the movement animation, so the walking animation that she does, and we want her to go from point X to point Y at depending on the movement speed. So that's all part of the move function, all those different things that need to happen together. Another example that I can show you is flashing, right? When I flash, what happens? One, I need to, the flash animation happens where I disappear and come here. Then I need to move into the direction of the mouse button. What else? The flash icon needs to go on cooldown for however many seconds that we set it to. So when I press D, it's very simple, like we're just pressing one button, but all those different things are happening together. And that's what a function means. It means that, you know, a series of events happen that are all related to each other. You press D and the output is that your character moves all the way here, but there's a lot of all the different small things that are happening underneath. All right, so let's also look at some examples in Final Fantasy. Now let's talk about functions as well. In Final Fantasy, I just want to show you it's the same exact thing. So an example of it is, again, like let's say I'm going to use Sheltron, this ability, when I press 8, right? So when I press 8, what's going to happen? This costs 50 oaths, right? So I have 80 here. This costs 50, so this goes down to 30. This gives me more block chance, so my block percentage should go up on my character. It's going to play the animation for this spell, and then also this spell goes on cooldown. So all those things need to happen at the same time when I press 8 or when I use the ability Sheltron, and that's the function. Sheltron is literally a function that does all those different things inside of it. So as you can see, I press 8, the animation plays, my oath gets reduced from 80 to 30, this goes on cooldown and it comes back up. There's actually, yeah, I mean, the general cooldown for between spells in Final Fantasy, I'm not sure what it is. I think it's 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds, depending on how much skill speed you have. But I think you guys get the gist, the idea that what I'm trying to say here. And it's the same thing with all the different abilities that you have. Like when I press 1, what's supposed to happen? So if you take a look at it, you'll see that you're supposed to do a damage with a potency of 200. It's going to play a certain animation. The HP of the enemy is going to get reduced, and all of that's going to happen at the same time. And here I'm going to press 1 now, and you see that happen, right? And that's the idea. The same thing, like your Riot Blade is another function, and your Goring Blade would be again another function, right? So that's really the idea behind functions. And if you paid attention closely to the first lesson and you look at the second lesson, you'll see that really what we're doing is we're combining all of the concepts together to actually make a game. So just as an example here, when I say if I press 1, that's the conditional statements that we talked about, right? And then we said Fast Blade is a function because it's doing all those things together. And then I'm a paladin class in the game, and based on my crit chance, for example, which is a variable for my class, my ability is going to hit it's going to hit harder based on those numbers, right? So all of those different concepts are coming together. Or in the case of when I press /dance, I'm saying if I write dance and I press enter, then I want my character to do the dance function, which involves the dance animation, for example, right? And in the case of League, we're telling it if I write /dance, I want it to keep dancing, just loop and just keep dancing, and if I press something else, stop dancing, right? So you'll see we're mixing all these different concepts together to build a world, to build a game, or to build any piece of software. And really, I can tell you that not almost every piece of code or every piece of software, every game is really a mixture of all these basic principles.